Hello, everybody. My name is Katrina Stirton Dodd. I am the editor-at-large at Contagious. To kick things off, willkommen, bienvenue, welcome to the Contagious Villa, not just from the Contagious crew, but also from our brilliant friends at Goodloop, who are your co-hosts here today. Now, hopefully you're enjoying the amazing, sunny, hot weather here in Cannes. Even the locals, I understand, are finding it pretty intense at the moment. And I cannot help but connect that in my mind to the theme of the event that we're holding here today. Because we hear a lot these days, don't we, about global heating. But it's not overstating things to say that I think we're also beginning to feel it a little bit as well. So I'm really, really glad that you've chosen to start your day here with us to discuss an issue that's incredibly important as part of the conversation around brands and sustainability. Greenwashing, the pretty green lies that a lot of brands are finding themselves being caught in by claiming to be a little bit more environmentally friendly than they really truly are. Now, in 10 minutes or so, I will be inviting our expert panel of speakers up onto the stage to get into a discussion and hear their perspective on the issue of greenwashing. After that, we will continue the discussion until, I guess, around about 10 o'clock, where we'll wrap things up, and you'll be welcome to stick around a little bit longer for a bit of chat and maybe a little bit more sustenance before we throw you back out in the direction of the madness of the croisette and all the action that is going on down there. So let's get started, shall we? I want to kick off with this quote from Dan Ariely, because it sets up the issue and the context for the rest of the morning really well, I think. When we interviewed him for our magazine a year or so ago, he made a point that is both simple and rather profound. He said, capitalism has a lot of things going for it, but untamed capitalism can be devastating. Now, if you're here today, there's a pretty decent chance that you agree with that statement. And I think there's also a pretty decent chance that some of you are also a little bit conflicted about the role that our industry plays in all of this. The ad industry takes a lot of flack for driving excess consumption, but in the last few years, I feel as though there has been a bit of an escalation in the feedback and commentary about that. We've seen organized protests making headlines in all kinds of places. If we go back to last October, my goodness, there were 4 days of action taking place across Europe, calling out high-profile ad agencies for promoting the products of high-carbon clients. The UK-based pressure group Badvertising launched a series of posters basically calling out these agencies for greenwashing on behalf of fossil fuel companies. Now, a collective of similar organizations called the European Citizens Initiative is lobbying local councils all over the EU to follow the lead of Amsterdam in banning the advertising of polluting cars, airlines, and fossil fuel brands. Now, all of the pressure of that external criticism, well, that's one thing, but there's also quite a lot of evidence of frustration within the industry as well. Oh, this stat kind of kills me. A survey by the Chartered Institute of Marketers found that 49% of marketers are weary of working on sustainability campaigns. Poor darlings. Honestly, folks, that does not sound good, does it? Interestingly enough, a part of that weariness is down to anxiety about being accused of greenwashing. And it's actually kind of a legitimate concern for these people. The same survey found that 40% of marketers admit that they lack any real sustainability marketing training or qualifications whatsoever. So their lack of confidence is really directly connected to feeling undereducated about all of the issues involved in this. Nevertheless, despite that, they are still expected to crack on and do the work. 76% of marketers say they have been involved in some form of sustainability work over the last 5 years, despite having no formal training in that whatsoever. So you can easily see where that sort of feeling of tension starts to creep in. But if people are nervous about doing the wrong thing, well, that also suggests that what they really want to do is the right thing. And I think that's very much the case in this industry. Gemma Butler, who is the marketing director of the Chartered Institute of Marketers, argues that if anything, their survey highlights the need for much more transparency right across the business landscape. She also says that marketers should remember that their job is not just about driving click-throughs or marketing a product. They are also in a unique position to influence social change. And she is absolutely right about that. Brands and businesses bear a lot of responsibility for the climate crisis that we find ourselves in. But the truth is, they're also our best bet for creating our way out of it as well. And the influence that brands and business have, that we here today all have, shows up in all kinds of different ways. Pioneering brands like Patagonia are an absolute inspiration for anyone who is looking for proof that sustainability and profitability can go hand in hand. Now, this is the ad everyone knows. This is the one that made them like a marketing case study. But Patagonia only gets more interesting the deeper into the company that you look. They are constantly looking for ways to lessen the impact that they have, whether that is through selling used products on their website, right next to the new merchandise that they have on sale, whether it is launching a VC fund that invests in socially responsible startups, or lobbying against drilling for oil in some of America's national parks. I mean, honestly, who could fail to be a little bit inspired by a company that slaps a lawsuit against President Trump? That is the way to do this stuff. It's even expanded into organic food and beverages. This lager up on your screen, Kernza Pils, it's produced using a crop that doesn't require any pesticides. It uses way less water than wheat, and it has the additional bonus of sucking loads and loads of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere as well. And every time they do something like this, what it does, I guess, is raise our expectations of other brands as well. Now, while we're on the subject of lager, we should have another click there, I think. Yeah, expectations, everybody. While we're talking about lager like this, let's also talk about the benefit of incentivization, I guess. Campaigns like this one, Contract for Change, highlight the role that incentivization plays when it comes to building more sustainable supply chains and potentially across all kinds of categories. This was an incredibly creative, but also a brilliantly pragmatic idea. Michelob Ultra Pure Gold, which is an organic beer, pledged to help farmers make the transition to organic practices and certification by agreeing to overpay them while they were in that transitional period. Now, during that time, their yield falls, so they would make less money selling at the normal price. So the guys at Michelob Ultra Pure Gold are overpaying during that period, and they're also promising to become their very first customers when the transition to organic certification is complete. Now, it's not just about growing crops, this whole idea. It's also about growing the market for a more sustainable product. And it also highlights how important it is to think about working together. And when we interviewed the sustainability director at Adidas last year, he was incredibly clear about this. He told us the time to go after sustainability in isolation is past. It needs a systemic approach. I think we can all feel the veracity of that. And true enough, Adidas has been really, really quick to understand the power of teaming up. Last year, they launched an extraordinary initiative. It was the production of a trainer called the Futurecraft Footprint. This is a low-carbon running shoe that Adidas developed hand in hand with Allbirds, which is a small but significant competitor within that same category. And they're also a certified B Corp. Now, within the space of, I think it was 12 months or so, they produced a trainer that has about 2.9 kilograms of carbon associated with its production. That's against a kind of industry average of about 12 or 13 kilograms. In 1 year, that is extraordinary. Since 2015, Adidas has also been working with Parley for the Oceans as a way of tackling the issue of plastic pollution. Now, Parley's founder, Cyril Gooch here, is incredibly clear about the the benefit of the edge of aspiration that the Adidas brand brings to this whole partnership. He sees it as absolutely essential to creating enough momentum for change to actually happen. But the main point is that in categories like this one that share supply chains, joint solutions are very often the best way of accelerating progress. Now, since I work for Contagious, I also have to talk a little bit about communication as well. The Chartered Institute of Marketers did some additional research last year with UK consumers in particular, and that revealed an expectation for companies to be doing more when it comes to sustainability. 63% of adults in the UK agree with the idea that brands should increase communications around sustainability of their products and services. But honestly, folks, here is the catch. They cannot afford to be boring about it because no one will pay the slightest bit of attention if they are. It's really, really not enough to sort of rationally communicate the facts about climate change and the climate emergency. Consumers have been sort of subject to years and years of images of distressed wildlife and bland messages from governments and brands about the things that they're doing to change, but all of that has been to no great effect. Sometimes you have to be a little bit different. You have to ruffle a few feathers in order to make things happen. So, oh my God, hooray then for a brand like Oatly that actually knows and understands the value of provocation. Their Help Dad campaign was really kind of funny. It was teenagers chastising their fathers for drinking cow's milk, which actually got them into a little bit of trouble. Lots of people really hated this campaign. First of all, farmers hated it because it portrayed the drinking of milk as a nasty habit. Fathers were really annoyed about it as well because they were portrayed as the problem and they felt rather patronized by the whole thing as well. But a lot of people also thought that the ads were mocking addiction and they thought that was not cool either. On the other hand, an awful lot of people really, really loved this campaign, and as a result, the conversation around it, the discussion, was heated, intense, and prolonged. This got a lot of airtime and a lot of traction. And all of that conversation is absolutely essential. It's what helps to create and keep the momentum for change alive. Now, we have a lot of work as an industry to do if we are serious about making a meaningful reduction in the impact that consumption has on the planet. And here's why, folks. In the run-up to COP26 in Glasgow last year, an econometric consultancy called Magic Numbers published a study that quantified the impact that our industry, the work of advertising agencies, has on the environment. This is a metric that they call advertised emissions, which is on our next slide. Actually, no, stay where you are, let's go. So what the study showed was that this is kind of extraordinary. Advertising adds 28% to the annual carbon footprint of every single person in the United Kingdom. Now, these advertised emissions are the equivalent of 186 million tons of greenhouse gases, or the equivalent of 47 coal-fired power stations running for a year. It's a lot of carbon. I think Adland absolutely loves a metric usually, but it's pretty confronting when the double-digit growth is quantifying just how much we all contribute to the climate emergency. That doesn't feel so good. But it's really, really important not to look away from this stuff. What gets measured gets managed, that old adage. And this kind of self-examination is absolutely essential if we really are serious about addressing this situation and addressing it properly. When we do our jobs well, we can use all of these tools and more in the service of building more sustainable lifestyles and more sustainable brands and more sustainable economies. But when we get it wrong and accusations of greenwashing start flying around, it undermines all of the good stuff. So, with all of this now as a little bit of context, it's time for me to invite our brilliant guests up onto the stage here to bring their perspective to a problem that we all end up somehow having to deal with in one way or another. So Amy, Ben, Firdaous, and Shakaila, if you could come up and grab a seat, we'll start making introductions. Thank you, everybody. thank you all so very much for being here today. I think we should kick off with some introductions. So beginning with Firdaous, can you tell everyone who you are and where you work, please?
Thank you, Katrina. I'm Firdaous. I'm the Global External Communications and Sustainability VP at Dodd in Unilever.
And Shakaila?
Hi everyone, so happy to be here. I'm Shakaila Forbes-Bell. I'm a fashion psychologist and consultant, and I'm the author of the new book, Big Dress Energy.
I'm literally so jealous of your job. Amy, would you go next?
Hi, I'm Amy. I'm the founder and CEO of Goodloop. We are an ethical advertising platform. We build products that make it easy and scalable for brands to do good.
Fantastic. And Ben?
I am a broadcaster, environmentalist, and United Nations patron for the wilderness.
Amazing stuff. Well, listen, let's get started, shall we, folks? Amy, I think I want to start with you. Let's get things moving with a question that's going to seem kind of stupid, maybe a little bit disingenuous, but you know, with so much effort already going into making brands and businesses more sustainable, how much of a problem is greenwashing really in your perspective? Is it really such a big deal? Are we making a mountain out of a molehill here?
It is a little bit of a problem, yeah. Greenwashing is a problem both when it's successful and when it's unsuccessful, I would say. When it's successful, it creates complacency and can distract us. You know, it can really delay progress because it kind of distracts us from important issues. And when it's unsuccessful, it can confuse consumers, demotivate us, and cause people to kind of disengage, which is really dangerous. You know, we've all had that vegan friend that's really smug because they stopped eating beef burgers, and then turns out their avocados are shipped over from Brazil and their almond milk is using up all our fresh water. And like that feeling of paralysis, of like there is no way to win, that can be really, really damaging and really, really disincentivizing.
Yeah, and I think we feel it a little bit every day. It's confusing being a person who needs to buy stuff at the moment, and that's everybody, isn't it? If we turn to you, Ben, I think although this is a subject that everyone sort of sitting here today will be thinking about every day on one level or another, a lot of us are also rather shielded from the actual real-world impacts of the climate emergency and what is going on out in the world. But as the UN patron of the wilderness, what is your experience of the outcomes that we're seeing from all of this? And why have you come to the world's biggest festival of advertising this year?
First of all, the elephant in the villa. You know, I had my own and have my own environmental impact just coming here today, flying down here.
Yeah.
And it's something that I struggle with through my work. A lot of my work does have environmental messaging, whether it's the TV shows that I do. But I see firsthand. I see the impact in the polar regions, in the rainforests, and I don't want this to become a depressing morning of statistics. We've already seen some fascinating ones now. But what has empowered me is seeing people who have embraced different ways of life, who have abstained from capitalism, consumerism. And I find myself straddling this line between the two worlds, which is really complicated. I find myself conflicted because on one hand, I want to try and mitigate my own carbon footprint, but it's a case of least worst option. And this is kind of my attitude towards it. As you were just saying, a lot of people are disincentivized because they're worried about being called out. So as soon as I put my head above the parapet, I'm going to be an environmentalist. But what about your carbon footprint? You're flying all over the world, and you've got children, and you still eat a little bit of meat. So what does that make of you? But we need to change this narrative from this assumption that if you put up your green flag, Patagonia, let's use them as an example, there's an assumption then that you must be 100% perfect. But my kind of encouragement to people that I meet is, why don't we try to encourage 100% of us to make a 10% change to our lives, rather than this insistence that those 10% of us who are eco-warriors make a 100% change to our lives, and therefore stand accused of the shortcomings. So I try, first of all, to just tread this very fine line between the two. But in answer to your original question, yes, I see firsthand it's happening. You can't bury your head any longer. Yep. But I also do feel empowered that we can make a change. The final thing on this, because I'm aware we've got to get through everyone, is we need to change the messaging from let's save the planet to this idea of let's protect the planet. Because the planet's not going anywhere. Yeah, this is the thing. I see it with the eco-anxiety in children, my own children. They're in tears. We're going to be flooded out of our homes. Fire and brimstone's going to come out of the earth. It's not. This planet is unbelievably resilient. What we need to save is ourselves. And to save ourselves, we need to just care and respect the planet around us a little bit more.
So why can this year, Ben?
Sorry?
Why can this year? Is it to talk to the advertising community and sort of...
Over the last 25 years, I have been part of many campaigns, working with every brand imaginable. And it took me a long time to see through the greenwashing. And I hold my hands up. I have probably inadvertently, sometimes maybe I just wanted to bury my head, been part of campaigns that I didn't really believe in. And I'd like to think in the last 10 years I've honed my skills a bit. I'm still caught out occasionally. Sometimes I work with brands on brilliant campaigns and they really do feel like they are empowering and they are creating actual change. Yeah. But I also see, I mean, the number of brands who say, right, we'd like you to be part of this. We're going to do a beach clean. I mean, I probably get one a week. Another brand who's going to buy a rainforest, we'd like you to be part of it and every product is going to contribute. Now listen, I'm saying that with a slight cynical twinkle in my eye. I still think that all change is good. And I think if we can start to make a dent on that 28% that you just mentioned there, then that's got to be a good thing. So I like to be a positive empowerer, and I'm aware that I can be used, just this, because of what I stand for, is sometimes used as greenwashing. You could argue that I'm greenwashing myself by being here and saying how virtuous I am, having just flown down here. So I think we just have to explore the contradictions that is consumerism and living a modern life in 2022.
And walking that line is always so tricky. If I come to you, Firdaous, Unilever brands like Dove, where you work, have a commitment to sustainability more or less built in. But when brands try to communicate their efforts, some people will stand on the sidelines and applaud what you're doing. An equal number will be criticizing you and saying, well, yeah, amazing, but why are you not doing so much more? It's not hard in that context to see why a lot of brands will kind of fall into the trap of trying to build up their sustainability efforts in order to look better than they actually are. So can you maybe tell us how you manage that internally at a big global brand like Dove and how you prevent it from happening? Because the temptation must be strong sometimes.
Yeah, thank you, Katrina. I think the first thing that I would like to acknowledge is that it's really important for brands to embrace the fact that they are on a journey. So I think it's really important to understand that you're not going to get it perfectly right from the start, but you need to aim at getting it right at some point. And so what is going to happen is, just as marketeers, but also as, people that are passionate for sustainability, wanting to do, to make sure that we do good for this planet, we just need to acknowledge that this is part of a journey. And we need to be transparent with consumers when we talk about what we're doing. I think that's really critical. No one is expecting you to be perfect. As you were saying, Ben, I think it's really important that we own up to the things that we're not doing right, and then we share the things we're doing right, but in a very transparent manner. So that, I think, is really key for us to acknowledge. The way to avoid, for me, is thinking about action first. So, how people start saying, sustainability sells, for example. But before you go even to that point of sustainability sells, there is a lot of things you need to do first. So action. You need to ground everything you say into very strong action. For us, it was very clear. We identified actually the areas in which we wanted to lessen our impact, be it our packaging, be it our formula, and be it about being cruelty-free as the largest beauty brand in the world, when actually it was only reserved to niche brands before. So we decided actually to take ownership of those actions and deliver on them. And I can talk about a few of them. The second point is about actually, when you take actions, is about driving impact. So you were talking about the beach clean, for instance. Like those things, we've been approached also as a brand to do more of it. So what we decided to do also, like, the ocean-bound plastic, we've seen so many limited editions going on shelves. We decided not to do that. We said, that's not what we're going to do. We're not here to do limited editions. Sustainability is about the long term, so we need to drive impact. So for instance, when it came to packaging, in 2018, we decided actually to shift the totality of our bottles to 100% recycled plastic. So all our bottles in North America and in the EU are made with 100% recycled plastic. At that time, I can tell you PCR, it was like quite difficult to get it, even like from a technology perspective, to get the quality, to get something that consumers want to buy and not to disrupt too much their day-to-day, but making sure they understand what we've been doing and doing it across the totality of our portfolio. And I think that's really the kind of things that we aim for. That said, it doesn't mean that we should not experiment. Because you cannot shift consumers right from the start and say, okay, I'm going to change completely your behavior from one day to the other. But you can start experimenting. So you do the impact through the bulk of your work, the bulk of your products, which we've done with our Dove products, body wash, hair products that you buy are all made out of 100% recycled plastic. But then we said, now we're going to try and pilot new thinking. We launched a refillable for life deodorants in the United States. And we were like, we need to see how people actually, embrace that product, and then we will be able to scale it. But really with the mindset of always impact at the end, it's never about, let's do a limited edition so that we sell more. The thing that I wanted also to say is that it's quite difficult, that's true for marketeers, but let's be honest, the corporates is one thing, taking corporate commitments is one thing, but consumers don't go and look for your corporate commitments on a website. They actually follow brands, and that's why advertising, but not only big advertising, but also the information on shelf, is really critical for consumers. The brands are the ones that are going to be able to take consumers with them in the journey to fight climate change. And this, we need to really own it and be aware that it's happening. We have a huge responsibility, but at the same time, we can actually take them with us. And I think it's powerful. It's amazing to have this kind of responsibility. Don't be scared. I think it's just, if you ground it into action, if you're transparent, if you ground it into also being very authentic with your consumer in the way you talk about sustainability, because let's be honest, no one is sustainable. We're thriving for sustainability. We're trying to get there, and I think we need to be very transparent with consumers.
The struggle is real. Now, we've spoken a little bit about the world of big corporate brands, but let's think about consumers as well. Shakaila, you're an expert in particular in the psychology of consumers, especially when it comes to fashion. So how did they respond to communications about sustainability coming from brands? How does it hit them?
I think generally people feel positive when they see those kind of sustainable initiatives. Altruistic behaviors, it makes people feel good. Psychologists call this the helper's high. So you get that boost of endorphins, it reduces stress management. All of that good feeling comes when you feel like you're doing something good. But the issue that we have today is that that good helper's high feeling is being, weighed against the instant gratification that we get from consuming new things, that dopamine boost that we get from, experiencing novelty when we're buying things. And on the same hand, it's just very difficult in this day and age when people want to balance their need to be part of the cultural zeitgeist and, fit into trend-led items, but also people generally do want to be sustainable. So how do you do that? And how do you overcome that when Pretty Green Lies are kind of communicating in the same way as genuinely sustainable brands? So the issues that brands need to kind of overcome is not really looking at the sustainable consumer as, a monolith, thinking about the different motivations that people have to be sustainable. So psychological research has split this out. There's people with intrinsic motivation, so people who generally just feel good about being sustainable, people who have sustainable initiatives or environmentally conscious, that's just part of their identity. So buying into sustainable initiatives, it helps them feed into that, helps them have more alignment between what they're doing and who they are, and that makes them feel good. But there's people who have extrinsic motivations, the fact that sustainability is just popular right now, people want to feel part of the group, so they're being sustainable because it makes them feel popular, it makes them feel that they belong. But there's also like introjected motivation, so people who engage in sustainability in order to avoid feelings of guilt, in order to, boost their self-esteem. So there needs to be an awareness of how communication can reach all of these consumers with these different motivations so that it can really cut through. And the second thing I think that brands need to do in terms of their communication is understanding that they need to speak to the individual. It's sad to say, but we saw this with the pandemic, thinking about the general person or things far away, or even with the environment, thinking, oh, someone in a country, in a remote place that you haven't heard of, they're facing challenges. A lot of the time, people are generally thinking about themselves. So what brands need to do is they need to think about how they can speak to the individual consumer, how they can understand how sustainable initiatives affect them on a personal level, how they can benefit, and how they can avoid the negative impact of it as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because it does feel like a lot of the advertising and marketing that we see is very broad. And I guess, my goodness, Rory Sutherland would probably back you up all the way in terms of the benefits of focusing on specific kind of psychological responses. Now, Amy, I think, we probably all agree that greenwashing very much happens in the industry currently, almost routinely, from a proportion of companies, and it is a problem. But are there steps that you feel brands can take in order to help solve that? And are there ways perhaps specifically that Good Loop is helping with that?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has been covered actually. Like there's some really clear points around just being authentic and starting with action. I think that's absolutely the number one message. I also think that there's a few behaviors we need to unlearn as an industry. Marketers are inherently taught to focus on benefits, right? That's what we do. We big up the positives and we play down the negatives. We are professional. We professionally roll turds in glitter, let's put it that way. And glitter is famously bad for the planet. So we need to be a little bit less focused on creating narrative and a little bit more focused on communicating honest progress. Because we aren't perfect, and Innocent got in trouble for this. Their ad was banned by the ASA. Innocent are a very famously ethical, sustainable, proactive, positive company, but their advertising got a little too excited and sort of implied that drinking an Innocent smoothie was good for the planet. Now, the good thing for the planet is to pick an apple off a tree and eat it and not buy anything in any packet. But Innocent's recycled plastic is a fantastic step towards using less virgin materials. So just being a little bit more pragmatic and honest about progress and being open to saying we're not quite there yet is something our industry isn't very good at. And the other thing our industry does a lot is focus on differentiation. How are you going to win against your competitors? And this is a space where nobody can win. There is no owning sustainability. There is no carving out a brand niche. It's not a branding exercise. It's a survival exercise. And so not thinking about it as a trend, not thinking about it as something that you can own as a business, and really focusing more on collaboration. It is not natural to advertising as an industry, but it's something that is absolutely paramount. And the final thing I'll say is just, and this is a bit of a controversial one, but actually let's have more greenwashing, because as long as we're calling it out, it means that we are making progress, and I think the worst outcome is that every brand sits there going, oh, this is too daunting, let's not bother, because then we will never see steps forward. And where we see businesses create an eco range, yeah, it may be a special edition, and that's not great, it should be integral, but if consumers start buying that special edition, they might make it their core product, or it might start to have systemic effects on the rest of the supply chain. So where can we see these small little grains of progress, and where can we really champion them?
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot to be done in terms of marginal gains and a rising tide of more sustainable behavior lifting all brands eventually. Now, thank you also for providing the quote of the day. That was a golden moment. Turds and glitter, everybody. Firdaous, I mentioned earlier this weariness that many brands marketers are feeling when it comes to the challenge of communicating sustainability effectively as well as honestly and creatively. What advice do you have for people in the industry who are perhaps trying to do the right thing, but feeling a little bit, well, damned if I do, damned if I don't about it all?
I think you were saying it earlier in the statistics, and the data was showing that actually, they want to act, but they are stressed out. They are worried about falling into the greenwashing bucket. So it's a very difficult exercise. And also, you were saying that they were lacking expertise. So that's really important, I think, as a point, is that, of course, as marketeers, you know, you've been trained to be a marketeer. You've not been trained to be a sustainability expert. So I think it's fine to be aware of these things. You know, we know what we know. We don't know what we don't know. So then reach out. Speak to people that know. In your business, sometimes you might have some people that are actually experts in the field. You might have like a sustainable sourcing team, for instance, that knows better about how to source, you know, an ingredient. Go and talk to them. Don't try and invent stories that are not based in facts that they can share with you. Go outside, speak to experts. Ask them to have like a critical point of view on what you're trying to claim, for instance. Say to them, this is what I'm going for. I'm going to actually go for 98% biodegradable on my formula. Give me your point of view. Get the learnings. I think it's really important to not sit down and close yourself to actually the rest of the world thinking, oh, I'm ashamed, I don't know enough. No, go and speak to people because that's all right. It's really important that you get that expertise from others. I would say also, you know, go into the detail. Like, for instance, when I heard about this, obviously there is a huge conversation at the moment around biodegradability of the formulas and also of packaging. I actually, before going into that territory, I did a lot of like unpacking, trying to understand what was out there. And I realized actually there was absolutely zero legislation when it comes to biodegradability. But then I spoke to my R&D team and they said to me, there are global standards that are quite strict, but people are not necessarily applying them. You know, they're just claiming biodegradability, various percentages, just putting it out there, right? And so we said, okay, well, what are the highest standards? And we took those highest standards and we said, those are the ones we're going to apply. And what it means is that everything that is sitting in that formula needs to degrade into materials which are very clear. We share with consumers carbon dioxide, it's water, and it's minerals. And we need to be able to share that with our consumers and say, this is how it degrades. And so we were like, and it needs, our standard was then actually it needs to degrade within hours, days, and a maximum of a few weeks. And we went for that. We went to our formula, we spoke out to our R&D, and we got to 98% biodegradable. So we know we're stuck with the last 2%. And we've been clear with consumers, we're working on it. But we got to 98% biodegradable, and we're going to explain to you what it means. And we don't say just 98% biodegradable, because whilst I was speaking to consumers, I realized actually that they did not understand. They thought I was talking about packaging. And I said, okay, so this is very confusing. So speak also to consumers. And actually then we said, okay, let's substantiate it. It will be 98% biodegradable formula on the packaging so that people understand that we're not talking about the pack. So it's unpacking, trying to understand. Don't go and claim like eco-green, green whatever. I don't understand what it means. No consumer understands what it means. It's just fake. Go into tangible claims that you can make. Speak to your R&D. Speak to the people that have the expertise. And make sure you're transparent about where you are on the journey, as we said earlier, the last 2%. We're not there yet, but we're going to get there. We swear. We're working on it because by 2030, all our formulations will be biodegradable. This is a good start. So that's how I think we should approach it. But also on advertising, we have a massive responsibility in terms of creativity. I have to say, and I want to use today our audience being here in Cannes to say, we need also as creatives, to be very tangible in what we share, but also inspire, action from consumers. Because consumers, I know you talked about benefits and how we're obsessed. But when you speak to consumers, they also tell you, I want to be sustainable, but I need my products to do the work. So your value proposition as a product needs to work. It cannot be just like, let's go for sustainability. Because then actually the consumer is going to be disappointed. They're going to buy a deodorant and it's not going to do the work it was supposed to do. And they're going to leave it on the side. And they're never going to buy you again because they will be, I've been disappointed. No, thank you. So if we want to take people with us in the journey, we need to deliver on the benefits, but we also need actually to make sure we're doing it in a responsible manner. And so there is no taboo. And that is delivering people to follow us, to change behavior, but also to drive growth for the business so that it invests even more into sustainable alternatives.
It's so true. I mean, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to jump on the point around speaking to others and seeking advice from experts. I think that's a really, really lovely one. You sort of mentioned some of the internal sources of that, but the one I'd like to add would be NGOs. There are some amazing NGOs that really are amazing experts, and we don't have to be the experts, we're the marketers, but globally 2% of philanthropy goes to sustainable charities. 2%, just 2%. And we all know how big this crisis is. So thinking about how you can collaborate with the NGOs that have on the ground experience, they have real world impact, and they have the expertise to bring credibility to what you're doing. We've got a campaign we're running at the moment with Nature Valley. Nature Valley is obviously a cereal bar, so they're sort of to kind of go straight to the product. Their product is about taking cereal from the kitchen table out into nature. So then they've had this fantastic brand purpose around national parks and getting people outdoors, which extends into a sustainability initiative through their partnership with the National Parks Foundation. And by working with Good Loop, they funded over $350,000 to restore national parks across the US. So that's where, it starts with the product, it starts with an authentic positioning on a sustainable issue, and then it partners with an NGO to have real world impact. So I just wanted to add, I think NGOs are a huge, huge champion in this.
Absolutely, and I think that the point that I would add to all of this is that I don't think anybody really expects marketers and people in advertising to have all the answers all the time at their fingertips, but my God, it's an industry packed full of intelligent, creative people, so it's not asking too much to go out and educate yourselves and not wait for someone else to do it for you. Shakaila, if I can turn to you, we've spoken a little bit about what brands can do, but what do you think would make a meaningful difference for consumers who are struggling to make those more conscious choices? How can brands do a better job of helping with that?
Yeah, I think from a consumer perspective, again, it's understanding that sustainability, it's not just a global issue, it's not just a moral issue, it's a personal issue. So the pandemic has caused a rise in, hedonistic behaviors. People just want to generally feel good. And, it needs to be communicated and understood that engaging in sustainable behaviors helps you feel good by helping you avoid negative personal ramifications. So there's an acclaimed psychologist by the name of Tim Kasser, and he observed that, overt materialism and overt consumerism has a direct link to anxiety and depression. So it's about understanding from an individualistic perspective that engaging in sustainability, it's a way to protect yourself, and it's a way to, boost your self-esteem, and, especially in this climate, it's more important than ever. And I think brands have a significant role to play. I think sometimes I have an idea, I think it's a bit far-fetched, but the same way that, gambling, you have that disclaimer at the beginning telling the people who want to engage in gambling that, they need to do so responsibly. Why can't brands, especially fashion brands, why can't they do the same thing as well? They have that data there. They know how much their consumers are buying. They know if they're spending thousands or hundreds of pounds every week, every month. They can encourage them to, take a break, stop, engage in mindful consumption, allow them to ask themselves questions like, am I buying this for the right reasons? Is this something that you're going to overuse? Encourage them to do a cost per wear analysis to make the most out of their things that they want to buy, because we're not going to stop consuming anytime soon. So it's about giving them this space and opportunity to help them consume in a mindful and in an informed way.
Fantastic. Now, Ben, you must feel as though I've forgotten about you. It's really not the case. It's important to give everyone a chance to speak, but I think the audience here today, they're mostly people with an active role of one kind or another in building brands and in encouraging consumption. But I think it's fair also to say that people here today are wanting to encourage people to make sustainable choices and do the right thing. So as a champion for our increasingly fragile and imperiled environments and ecosystems, is there a message that you would like to deliver to this audience today?
Well, there is obviously a conflict of interest. So my form of green living with my family is need versus want. Now, the very nature of your industry means you're turning need into want. You're encouraging people that might not previously have bought that product to buy it. I get it. It's consumerism and it's how the world turns, and I'm a part of that whole process. Over the last 10 years, I've lived with people at hundreds of locations around the world who have abstained from consumerism. They've gone to live off-grid. Now, the statistic that I would take away, and I don't have an absolute statistic taken from a statistician, but for me, there's 100% happiness amongst those people. They have abstained from consumerism. They have abandoned the pressures of modern life. And it's much more complex than that. But that's not how the whole world would live, and it would be terrible if everyone went away and said, right, we're going to go and live off-grid now, we're going to stop buying things, we're going to wear the same jacket or shirt forever and ever. But what I find really interesting is when I look at your presentation before this and I see that famous advert from Patagonia, don't buy this jacket, that gets me so excited. Now, what I'd say to you, why does that campaign stand out against all the others which are about consuming and buying? And it's because it's absolutely honest. So how do you balance your jobs and trying to sell products with what consumers want? Because believe me, consumers want less. I know it sounds a very strange thing, but you only need to have a look at my show, New Lives in the Wild, about people who live this very simple life, has twice the number of viewers than shows about great hotels around the world, because people are obsessed with this idea of minimizing their lives. And the second thing I would just leave with all of you is that one size does not fit all. So the number of times I've been told plant a tree is good for the planet. Well, let me share with you a tiny example of one of the weirdest, most exciting projects I did. I went out to Siberia a couple of years ago to work with some Russian scientists who have created a place called the Pleistocene Park. Now, the Pleistocene Park is an area where they are trying to bring back the flora and fauna of a million years ago. And they're actually trying to bring back the woolly mammoth. Now, it sounds ridiculous. Why are you doing this? Someone's probably thinking, that's a great advertising campaign. Yes, we could do that for our brand. Well, there's a reason for it. The melting of the permafrost in Siberia and across Alaska is one of the great ticking time bombs. Now, again, I don't want everyone to go away feeling depressed. But the reality is, if that permafrost thaws, the CO2 emitted will overwhelm everything that we're worrying about, and there'd be no point in even making the smallest of changes. So we need to stop that permafrost melting. Now, the reason the permafrost is melting is because of trees. Without the animals and the people in Siberia, there is no shielding of that layer of permafrost because the snow can't reach it. So it's melting. So the key in Siberia is to cut down trees. So this idea that one size fits all, that all plastic is bad, that all trees are good, is not necessarily the case. And keep consumers on their toes. Share all of these exciting stories about what people are doing. And the final thing, just to add to that, is that exactly as Amy said, I don't think greenwashing is necessarily bad. I'm a champion. So I like to think that even if a big brand with a terrible track record comes to me and says, listen, this is what we're going to do. We have bought a forest. We're really trying to make a difference. The hysterical press, probably left-wing, are going to be going, we're calling you out on this one. But what's going to be the result? No one's going to try anything. So don't concede to the bully. And the bully is the person who picks up your shortcomings and not the person that champions what you are doing. So if we can start changing that narrative so that people don't feel embarrassed about failure, then we're going to be in a better place. And it comes back to that final statistic. Let's not try and encourage everyone to make a 100% change. Let's not try and have this absolute perfection, because we will never find it. There's too many of us on this planet. I don't need to be a scientist to tell you all. We have an impact no matter what we do. Even with that turd, before it's got glitter on it, it's having a negative impact. Go to Everest, they're all over the place. So, and they don't have glitter. At least it would be prettier. So my message to all of you is, don't be scared away from doing it, but do it with absolute honesty and integrity. Speak to those NGOs and do it with your head held high rather than kind of bowed down, waiting for the arrows and the bullets to come your way.
Amazing.
Katrina, can I say just one
Yes,
thing?
of course.
Because I just wanted to say thank you to Ben for saying that, because I think it matters a lot. You know, hearing it from brands or hearing it from people from our industry is one thing, but hearing it from you and having more voices like yours saying, go for it, you know. If you're going to do a mistake, it's okay, you know, it's all right. I think it's really important because we don't want people scared. They need to take, you know, citizens, consumers with them in the journey. And so that feeling of being scared because someone is going to come at you is something that needs to go away. And so I just wanted to say thank you for saying that, because it means a lot, I think, to the industry.
Yeah, there's so much more to lose ultimately by not trying. So good advice. As a final question to everyone to wrap things up today, could you each perhaps share one thing that you think people here today can do themselves as a way of perhaps doing their bit to tackle greenwashing and the impact of that? I think I will start with Shakaila.
I think it's just about understanding that, all consumption is not bad, but it's the way you go about consuming, doing it in a mindful way, developing an attachment to the things that you are buying. So asking yourself those questions about, is this something you find true value in? Is this something you're going to take care of? Because in that way you use your things, and you use particularly with your clothes as well, as an extension of yourself. And then that way you won't be enticed to engage in throwaway culture. You won't be enticed to continue consume trend-led items. So really looking at the things you own as things that you should cherish and things that you should value. So it's about changing your way of thinking as consumption, as not something that's driven by aesthetics, but something that's driven by personal values.
Amazing. Firdaous, I'll come to you next.
Thank you. I would say actually that, being here with the creative industry, I have one message. When you're crafting new campaigns for your clients, please make sure that you ask all the questions around the action that's behind that piece of advertising. Because if you, as a creative industry, also start challenging, sometimes brands in a positive way, I'm not saying in a negative way, but in a positive way, asking them, what's biodegradable? Can you tell me? What is your definition of it? How are you doing this? What's your journey? When are you going to hit the 100%? Please ask those questions. Even if you don't know, ask them to share with you the knowledge. There is a huge chance that you might actually be very positive about the output of those conversations, and sometimes you might be disappointed, and you would be like, okay, so why am I doing this campaign? Can you explain to me again? I think you should think about it twice, and you should potentially go further on action. And as an advertising, industry, you have the power to tell the client, I think it's not strong enough yet. You have to go back, to the drawing board and think about the actions behind this campaign.
And I think the corollary to that as well is that as a client, if you're a client here today, you need to sort of create the psychological safety that allows your partners to do that as well. If people push back, they're pushing back for a reason, and their points need to be heard. I'll come to you next, Ben. I feel like we've had some advice already, but one more perhaps pithy point for people today?
I think become aware of cause and effect. I first had that when I lived on an island for a year. I saw firsthand the impact we were having on our immediate environment. So the advice to you, if you work in the fashion industry, go to a land refill site. See where those clothes are being dumped. If you work in the food industry, go and have a look at the food waste and where that is going. Depending on what sector you go in, there are plenty of examples in the UK. You don't have to go far away. If you work in an industry where you're producing plastic, don't go to a beach in the UK and do a clean where there's going to be one single bottle. Go a little bit further afield. Go to Egypt. You will never, ever have seen anything so horrific. And don't, if you do that, obviously try to do it sustainably, but if you go to Egypt as well, don't go with this idea, well, it's all their rubbish, because a lot of it is exported from our shores. So I think go with your eyes wide open and try to learn and experience firsthand.
Great stuff. And now, Amy, as our brilliant co-host for today, the last word is going to go to you. What's your parting shot for everyone today?
Oh my God, a lot of pressure. Mine is much more practical, actually, and it starts from a journey that Goodloop went on, asking that exact question.
Yeah.
So Goodloop was about 5.5 years old, and from the beginning, I've always said I wanted our business to be carbon neutral, and that at the beginning, honestly, was finger in the air, throw some money at some trees, lovely old job. And then we became B Corp certified, which starts to get a little bit more granular, and we had to think a little bit more. Then we actually decided to calculate our scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3, and we actually did the calculation. Scope 1, lovely. Scope 2, a little bit harder, lovely. Scope 3, we had no idea. We realized that there was no way of knowing the consequences, the carbon emissions driven by our ads being out on the internet.
And those are digital ads, right? Yeah.
It's entirely digital, which you would think is quite sort of ineffective, right?
Yeah,
Inoffensive.
people think digital is somehow better.
Yeah. Whereas actually the internet has a larger carbon footprint than the airline industry. So we looked, there was no resources, there was no sort of real conversation about this, so we decided to calculate it ourselves. We looked to other industries, we looked to how website carbon emissions are calculated. We went to Dimpact and to Bristol University, we talked to various different stakeholders, and we developed a methodology for us to carbon offset our own carbon emissions of running digital advertising. And then we realized that other people wanted to do that. And we started having clients coming to us saying, you say your ads are carbon neutral, how do you do that? So about 18 months ago, we spun it off as its own product suite. We call it a green media suite. We have a green ad tag. It's kind of like a viewability tag, but for the planet. It's a little 1x1 pixel, sits within any digital ad campaign, good loop or otherwise, and it just measures, tracks, and offsets the carbon emissions of serving that advert onto a consumer device. It also, we've had some really interesting learnings from it, like time of day. If you run an ad at 4 p.m., it's primarily going to be using renewable electricity. If you run that same ad at 8 p.m. when everybody's cooking dinner and watching Love Island, which is probably more popular than your show, then...
Shots fired.
Then you're going to be using a lot more coal power electricity. So there's so many little insights, so many little easy wins, just by starting to measure it. You said earlier, the old adage, when things are measured, they are changed. So that's something I'm really proud of, and it's something that every brand in this villa and in this festival can use right now. That technology is available.
Amazing. Well, that brings our discussion here today to a close, everybody. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming along today. It's a really big issue for all of us. It's really hard, it requires effort, and it requires commitment and consistency as well. Big thank you to Goodloop for being our partners on this event. This was their idea. It's great to see so many of you here today. Thanks also to our brilliant guests, to Firdaous, to Shakaila, and to Ben as well. And thank you for coming, guys.